Hello everybody, this is take 28. I'm going to be talking about narrative wargaming today. It's an incredibly difficult subject to try to get through, and this has all started from the Inquisitor boarding party that I was talking about in the last video, and we've been chattering about it on my Twitch channel, in my Discord, about making boarding parties and how narrative. How I should, and not like how you should, but how I do approach narrative wargaming. I find it incredibly interesting. It's a really good way of playing the game, in my opinion, and it is very much grounded in the story of the environment on which you are playing. Now, we are very lucky at playing Warhammer 40,000 or even Age of Sigmar, because there is so much lore to talk about and explain the environment which we are playing in, and it's absolutely brilliant. So because of that, because of all the lore that we've got, when you're playing narratively, then you can really try and make the story drive the ideas which you're doing. So if we turn that camera on here, there we go. So if we very quickly look at Drakari, there's a few different ways you can look at narrative. So I've broken it down into an environment, a character's personality, and then you have the lore. So, for example, if you're going to do a character's personality, if you're going to try and make a narrative character to lead we're going to try and stick with boarding parties, and then you can extrapolate that from however you like. If you're trying to make let's say a succubus for a boarding party. Now, there's lots of things that you can do with a succubus. We've got, where is the succubus? Succubus is in here. So the succubus has got loads and loads of rules. So this is how you can take your succubus. However, if you wanted to make your succubus a little bit more interesting, or if you've got an idea about a succubus who maybe is working closely with a homunculus and has developed a new gladiatorial weapon that is a soul-sucking blade that she's using, that is feeding into her arm and dragging the life force out of the people that she's killing. One of the ways that we can talk about and make use of that narrative idea is taking rules from other areas and applying it in. So not only has Warhammer 40,000 got an incredible amount of lore around, we've also got an incredible amount of rules that we can kind of almost pick and choose. Now, you don't want to. One thing I want to try to get across, we're not doing this to make the most powerful character ever. So I'm not going to take my succubus, equip the succubus with some Terminator armor because she killed a Terminator recently, so she stole his armor. She then killed a Dark Reaper, so she's got a Dark Reaper launcher, and then she killed a Howling Banshee as well, so she now has a Howling Banshee blade and a Howling Banshee mask. So you can't overwatch her when she charges. She's got a 2+ save. She's got an invuln because maybe she's got a storm shield on the back. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about just making the most powerful model ever. We're trying to have a story that's surrounding the model, which is then going to influence maybe some of the decisions that we take when we're equipping her. So one of the good ways, one of the simple and easy ways of doing it is to look at the relics. So relics are great. And if we look over here, we've got all the gin blades and everything down here. So you've got a little bit of a fluff up at the top. If you look over here, there's something called a Parasite's Kiss. So the Parasite's Kiss is a model equipped with a splinter pistol only. Okay, so you can only have a splinter pistol with it. And it replaces that splinter pistol, and it has the following profile. So the following profile is a poisoned weapon. Each time an enemy model is destroyed by an attack with this weapon, the bearer regains 1 lost wound. So every time you kill something, you get a wound back. I think you can probably guess that if you were to give that to a succubus with lots of attacks, she's going to be killing things a lot. So she's going to be pretty much unkillable. So what I would suggest with doing something like this is that you would
maybe you could bend these rules and apply them to the succubus, because it says it's a splinter pistol. So now you can say it counts as a knife or a blade that she's got, and rather every time you kill someone, just once per turn or once per phase, because you're only going to be killing things in the charge phase anyway, in the combat phase. So once per turn, she gets a wound back. So that just narratively ties into the fact that she's been working with the homunculus to try to get this soul-sucking knife dagger thing working. And then maybe when she's on the boarding party, or maybe she's being boarded because some Eldar have figured out that she's got this technology and they want to take it back off her. So as soon as you have that little story in there, it then starts laying the foundations for some more ideas around the environment or what might be happening. So that's a Drukhari example. I also want to talk about missions as well, because the mission one is quite an interesting one, because the boarding party missions, in my opinion, are fantastic. Unfortunately, I can't show you any. I haven't got Arcs of Omen with me, but I can't show you any. But I can talk through some of them, and there is one in particular which I wanted to bring up, which was the radiation one. So there's a Arcs of Omen mission where you can where you're fighting over a spaceship that has got a radiation leak on one side, and the longer the game goes on, the further the radiation bleeds across the ship. So it's bleeding further and further across the ship, and if you are in the area for too long, then it affects your characteristics, it affects your stats. So the first turn that you're in this area, then you get -1 movement, I think, and then if you're in there for 2 turns, you get -1 toughness as well. 3 turns, you get -1 leadership, etc., etc. So you can take that and you can apply it to something else. So maybe you're fighting in a ship that has been vented out into space. It's an absolute ruin. It's a complete wreck. There's barely any hull left in it, so it's incredibly cold. So the coldness of space is now leaking and affecting each corridor and compartment across the ship. So rather than losing -1 leadership at the beginning of the compartments, maybe you lose -1 movement because it's getting very, very cold and it's getting icy. And then the further it goes, maybe you get -1 strength or -1 to your save characteristic because your armor is now getting so cold that it's less effective. Maybe the further you go, every weapon gets less. So it's taking some rules which are already set in, and I can't say this enough, that try to use the rules that are already set to then influence what you're going to be doing afterwards or what you're doing with them. So in a mission like that, don't do -4 leadership, like just little bits that just help telling the story, because when somebody is going to be getting into combat and you're now -1 toughness because you're really, really cold, and they're throwing two attacks at you, because boarding actions is not about throwing a million dice. It's about little fights here and there. So if your captain has just gone into the succubus, for instance, and the succubus is -1 toughness because she's very, very cold and she's going to be wounding it easier, so then it gets all exciting because is she going to be able to get saved, etc., etc. Anyway, so that's one of the ideas for doing some missions, so you can tweak the missions. Now I do want to do a video about cross-platform campaigns and doing Battlefleet Gothic, boarding parties, kill team, 40k, and kind of scaling and getting all those in. And at that point, then you're really telling a story, so you're really getting involved. And then you can pick and choose which mission you want, depending on what part of the story and the environment that you're telling. It's going to be really, really cool. Anyway, the next thing that I wanted to talk about
was this little book. So this little book is where, for anybody, I'm sure most of you, well, hopefully some of you will recognise this one. This is, I think it's third edition book, which is all about demon hunters and inquisitorial retinues. So this is where the idea for this came from. So that whole idea was, okay, well, if an inquisitor was going onto a ship, what would his retinue look like? Well, there's basis for that. There's basis for that in the lore. So we know what an inquisitorial retinue will look like because they have henchmen. The inquisitorial henchmen, there are lots of different types of henchmen. So there are familiars, which are cherubim, servo skulls, the cyber eagle that Coriax, I think his name is, has on his arm. You've got a hierophant, which is a priest. You've got general acolytes, you've got warriors, sages, and mystics. It's all really, really cool. So all these are set out. Now, there are rules for these in 40k at the moment. They're not very good rules, but who cares? So we're going to be having some fun with those. And there's also, the more you get through this, this is all the war gear that you get as well, and things like this are really, really interesting. There's an old Necron book which has got loads and loads of cryptic arcana in it, cryptech arcana in it, and I was pulling some of those ideas out. Like there's a tremor stave. So the tremor stave didn't really have much lore behind it, but it was a cool sounding weapon. So I made a Necron Lord. He's all over YouTube. He's one of my favourite. Not YouTube. No, he is. He's in YouTube. It's one of my favourite conversions. I made a Necron Lord with a hammer because Thunder Hammer, Tremor Stave, kind of the same thing. But he looks really cool, and that wouldn't have existed if there wasn't a little bit of lore and narrative flowing going through, and narrative thinking. So they can also get Grey Knights. So you can have an inquisitorial retinue with a Grey Knight. Now the Inquisitor's retinue, that's like rules on how many he should be having. Obviously that's not really relevant anymore. You can have Grey Knight Terminators, you can have Death Cult Assassins, which you can still have. You can have Demon Hosts, which you can still have. You can have Colexus Assassins, you can have all the Assassins down here as well, so you can still have those. And then you can have Grey Knights as troops and Inquisitorial Stormtroopers. Now in the official rules at the moment, you can have Acolytes, and that's pretty much it. You can also take some Navy Breachers and Voidsmen, but not if you take an Inquisitor. I believe that's right, which is where my little roster kind of comes in and just bends the rules a little bit. So what I'm trying to do is think about what an inquisitorial retinue might look like, and how to bring those rules into fruition. Now, I'd love to. It'd be really easy just to use the Breaches and the Voidsmen and have it at that. But because you can split the Navy Breaches into two different units, I thought that one of the units we could start to try to have some of these members of the retinue. Where is it? Here we go. So some of these members of the retinue, we can start converting some of these. So the warrior looks very much like a crusader, with his shield and sword, the crusader weapon which is out there. We've got a sage here. So they give at the moment they give the Inquisitor +1 ballistic skill, which is quite cool. That's quite a cool rule. And also, if you have a look here, it's also the kind of thing that the Rogue Trader's retinue does. So the Rogue Trader retinue, if you include a Rejuvenate, every time you lose a wound on a 5+, you don't. If you include a Lecto Maester model, every time you roll a 6, you improve the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1 as well. So the retinue that the Rogue Trader has, depending on what they are,
benefits the rest of the retinue. So what we could say is that rather than having a rogue trader, what we're going to do is we're going to put an Inquisitor in there, and then the retinue, we're going to make it slightly larger, and we're going to put in a Sage, we're going to put in a Mystic, and then we're going to find some appropriate rules and apply those to the retinue group. It's not going to be that big. It's not going to be that overpowering or anything. It's not like we're throwing in 18 aggressors into that unit. And also, points wise, 10 points, 15 points, that's about right, and it's about the same as the current acolytes. So the acolytes are the models which the Inquisitors can take as troops, and they are strength 3, toughness 3. They've only got 1 wound, they've only got 1 attack. I think they're leadership 7 as well, and they've only got a 5+ save, so they're pretty much identical to these. They've just got 1 less wound, but they're the same number of points. The only benefit with the acolytes is that you can give them pretty much any piece of war gear that you like, so you can give them a Thunderhammer if you wanted to. So you've got that possibility. So the Inquisitor retinue that I'm working on and kind of coming up with ideas, it's growing, and it's getting larger by the moment because of kind of flicking through this. And I knew in the lore that they could have Grey Knights. I know in the lore that Inquisitors can have Grey Knights, or they had Grey Knights in their retinues. I knew in the lore that they had Inquisitorial Stormtroopers. Now, the Inquisitorial Stormtroopers, you can make those count as, if you like, the Navy Breachers. So the Navy Breachers, you could just model them slightly differently, and then they look like Inquisitorial Stormtroopers, because stat line identical. Like it's quite an interesting, actually, because these stat lines translate over quite closely. But all of this kind of tweaking of the rules and everything is all grounded in the fact that we are playing in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. So if they are playing in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, what sort of... I mean, look at this. That's an Inquisitorial retinue if I've ever seen one. 2 units of... So I'm not going to be doing that, because that feels like a... that, for instance, feels not what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to take this little bit here and make it a little bit bigger. I'm not trying to take a Grey Knight army and add an Inquisitor. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. So I'm trying to expand out and think what an Inquisitor will call in to his aid. So if I had a Grey Knight Terminator, maybe I'd have 1 Grey Knight Terminator. They also, if they were Ordo Xenos, they work closely with the Death Watch. So maybe you'd have 1 Death Watch captain in there as well. Yeah, so it's just playing around with the rules that you have access to, and kind of stealing little bits from here and there. I mean, I know this is 3rd edition, but it sets it sets an example of what you can do based on the story that is already kind of set. So I'm not trying to do anything outrageous. I'm not trying to do anything overpowering. I'm trying to do a really, really cool idea, which is an Inquisitor boarding party. And when I do the boarding actions meetup at Warhammer World, you can bet I will have a couple of Inquisitorial boarding party missions planned, boarding action missions planned around the existing missions. So maybe there's one, I'm just thinking off the top of my head now, there's one mission in there which is power, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a power lines one. So the objectives, 2 of the objectives in the middle, or 3 of the objectives in the middle, are linked by a power line. So you could have in the story, you could have, it's not linked by a power line, it's actually the computer's system on the inside. So if the Inquisitor retinue can hold that central set of objectives for X number of turns, then they get more victory points, because their mission is to get in there and steal some data from the machine spirit of the ship. Okay, so can you see what we're doing? We're trying to set the environment and then use some of the existing rules to complement the story that we're trying to tell and have some fun with it. So I would really, really, really like to see what ideas and boarding parties everybody comes up with. Try not to. It's the old Spider-Man adage, like with great power comes great responsibility. Okay, so we're not with the great power that we have of we can pretty much use any rules that we like when we play our friends because we're just playing our friends. So we can use anything we like. The responsibility that we have is that I'm not going to create an inquisitorial retinue which has got 5 paladins in there, Grey Knight paladins in there. And loads and loads and loads of navy breaches for swarming the ship as well. So I don't want overpowered retinue. I want to have some fun with my friends. One of the most fun tournaments I've been to, and this was a tournament as well. I have fun at tournaments anyway because I'm trying to competitively out generalship my opponent, either with list or with my play. One of my favourite tournaments in 40k was taking a subpar list and just playing the hell out of it and getting up to the podium, which was great. But one of the one of the best games at an event, let's say an event, it wasn't a tournament. One of the best games at an event I've ever had was at a Lord of the Rings one, and now Lord of the Rings is so story led because it's based on Lord of the Rings, obviously, but the last game that I had in a team tournament last year, it was my elves, which included Glorfindel, versus my opponent who had some Black Riders and Sauron. So the only thing I tried to do in the entire game, the whole game, I was trying to kind of pull him apart, split him off, so that Glorfindel could charge Sauron and maybe take a wound off him. That was the only thing I tried to do. Like the mission rules, like trying to win, trying to get objectives or anything like that, was the only reason some of my models were going that way, and some of the models were going that way was to try to split its forces so I could get into Sauron. Like there was the only thing I wanted to do. It was the most fun game I've had of Lord of the Rings. It was so cool, and I did get in there, and he did win the combat. He did win a combat. Glorfindel did win a combat. Sorry, not Glorfindel, Gil-galad with his spear. But he didn't cause a wound. He didn't cause a wound. It was really, really close. So yeah, we're trying to use the amazing lore and story that we've got. I think we need to embrace some of the incredible lore that we get gifted. Like Games Workshop spend so much time and effort putting in all the lore and all the story. I think we need to embrace that a little bit more. Competitive play is brilliant when you're playing at a tournament where there needs to be a winner and prizes and things like that. But if you're playing your friends, or if you're going down to Warhammer World and coming to my boarding party meetup at some point, it's not about that. It's about having a pint, having some chips, rolling some dice, having a laugh, seeing if your Inquisitor can take on this demon prince that's just turned up on a boarding party. And I will not have that I can't take a demon prince because that sounds really cool, an Inquisitor, or even the Grey Knight Strike Captain, because everybody knows that Grey Knight Strike Captains know the true names for all the demons. That versus a demon prince on a boarding party, I don't know. It's just, there's so many cool ideas that you could do. Just with great power comes great responsibility. So don't go too far. Yeah, write the story, have some fun with it, see what you can come up with. There are lots and lots of rules. There was another really good idea that I had with the Imperial Guard as well, because the Imperial Guard are a great example of being able to do things like this because they've got so many rules. They've got loads and loads of rules. So you could take one of those little rules and apply it to your special character. Just add it in, just secretly. It doesn't make him ridiculous or anything like that. Just swap and change some rules around. And if you do give him something, maybe try to take something away from him as well. So have some fun. Please let me know what you're going to do. Join my Discord. Come and join me on Twitch. I'm going to be looking at the new LVO preview, so that's going to be a very, very exciting time tomorrow. We might even get some R-Bytes or RBTs. RBTs. So that's going to help my Inquisitorial retinue out as well, if we get some R-Bytes. I can't not say R-Bytes. It's just how I've said it forever and ever and ever. That's going to be really, really cool. Looking forward to that. Hope the rumours are true on that one. And yeah, come and hang out in Twitch. It's twitch.tv/Chris Frossin. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter, both at Chris Frossin as well. Thank you very, very much. Please, 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 if you like this sort of video and this kind of content, comment below. Like, share, and subscribe. You're all absolutely amazing. And I will see you at the next one. Oh, one more thing. We have... Where is he? My rogue trader. I dug him out the other day. So I now have my rogue trader. Now, he has a, as you can see here, he has a cigar or a cigarette in a holder. Do I keep the cigarette in the holder, or do I replace that hand with a pistol and give him a stiletto rapier and a pistol? He's kind of badass. What do we think? Comment down below, what do you think I should do? Does he need a pistol, or should he keep his cigarillo? Thanks, guys. Take care, and have a great weekend. Fingers crossed we all get some really, really cool stuff at the preview. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.